Yeah, I decided to re-edit this video with new top sprites. I want to be able to look back on this and not regret what I made, and I feel like I can't do that with top sprites that even I felt iffy about. I mean, hell, I got an email talking about how bad these were. But other than that, I hope you enjoy this re-edited version of the video. My spoiler warning still stands. Hey everyone, Road Breach here, and today we're taking a look at Five Nights at Freddy's Secret of the Mimic. Five Nights at Freddy's Secret of the Mimic is a horror stealth game developed by Steelwool Studios and published by Scott Games for PC and PlayStation 5 on June 13th of this year. I'm sure we're all aware of Security Breach and how it failed to live up to many people's expectations. From lackluster gameplay to the bad story, Security Breach doesn't have a lot going for it other than aesthetics. But Steelwool wasn't done with the franchise, so they made Help Wanted 2, which is good, but I feel it lacks a special sauce that the first game had, and Secret of the Mimic, which is similar in structure to Security Breach. But how does the game fare when compared to the former? Well, grab a data diver, and let's see what this game has to offer. The game's aesthetics are quite good. The lighting and reflections aren't the best, probably as a way to make it more accessible to those with weaker hardware, but the actual art style is where the true strength of the visuals lies. The room decor looks appropriately retro, with these lines of color strategically placed throughout certain rooms of Murray's costume manor. The stained wood boards on the walls and certain floors, with intricate patterns on the carpeting, the desks, and the retro technology like the tape recorders and computer monitors that have monochrome displays, help this building feel believable in a 70s setting. There are things like mechanical doors and advanced robotics that require your suspension of disbelief, but I'm able to do that because you can rationalize it as Edwin, the CEO of Murray Co., wanting to go all out with his technology. And some of this stuff isn't too far off from what existed at the time. But the building isn't just about form, because there are plenty of storage areas for all the Murray Co. paraphernalia, as well as offices, a hospital, and facilities designed to get feedback from test audiences, like a theater in a carnival. There are more well-crafted areas to talk about, but I've gotten comments about spoilers, so I'll talk about them later. One technique I noticed to help with optimization is that windows to different parts of the building will have these dome facades to try and give the illusion of depth, and essentially try to make it look like you can see into a room that isn't actually loaded in. I'll give points for trying, even if it's not particularly effective. I should also point out that the game has a lot of dark areas, but don't worry, you won't need to find anything in these parts. Mostly. In Security Breach, things were a lot more spacious, but in Secret of the Mimic, things are a lot more claustrophobic, making you feel like there's not much you can do to avoid danger. You can avoid danger for the record, but we'll get into that later. The character designs for the mascot costumes and other animatronics fit into the retro aesthetic. They look less refined than other designs in the franchise, which further cements the game's visual identity. And characters like Chica and Roxy make their earliest appearances in the timeline, with some retro designs. And considering that the glam rock era started in 1969, this isn't too out of place for Roxy to be here. Another thing I like about the visuals are these film reels that have commercials for different Murray products that use techniques like Synchrovox or animated like cartoons you'd see at the time. Now let's talk audio. There's subtle ambient noise to help add to the atmosphere. It's not much, but it's a welcome detail that helps add to the immersion. But ambience isn't the only thing you'll hear, because boss encounters have their own music, which sounds pretty good. Plenty of tracks have instrumentals from a music box, but the soundtrack also makes use of guitars and orchestral music. It's difficult to really summarize the soundtrack, but it doesn't sound like something from any other horror game I've heard, helping it stand out but still fitting into the genre with the tone. But the music isn't all intense horror music, because there are some tracks that are meant to be for in-universe shows that have fun jovial tones to help contrast with the man-made horrors you'll normally be facing. So the game's presentation is really good, even if it's not particularly cutting edge, and the overall atmosphere is far more conducive to a horror game. So let's talk game mechanics. Secret of the Mimic is a stealth game with puzzle solving. You'll need to complete an objective while sneaking past an animatronic. The Mimic will enter a mascot costume and patrol the area for a while, then switch to a different costume and repeat. If you get spotted, the Mimic will chase you until it either catches up to you or you hide from it in a locker, but the Mimic won't be fooled if you hide within its line of sight. You can also make noise by throwing wind-up mice, walking through chains, and hitting buttons on these cutouts, which will play the Mycelium Men theme. Doing one of these will lure the Mimic out to the source of the noise, which will allow you to complete the objective. As for the puzzles, these are quite good. They'll require you to look for context clues and use that information to find the solution. For example, looking at monitors to find numbers and enter them into a nearby keypad in the order they appeared, or moving pieces of an obstacle course so it leads you to an area you need to get to. One puzzle that's pretty simple, but I still find pretty satisfying, are these tube puzzles that require you to line up the tubes so the liquid flows to the exit tube. But the tiles aren't just straight tubes like in other variations of this concept, because some of the tiles have tubes with several exits. And if you don't do this within the time limit, then the machine overloads. As simple as these puzzles are, I have a soft spot for these. There are monitors you can go to in order to look at the map. Obviously, it wouldn't make sense to be lugging one of these things around, so this makes you need to memorize what door goes to what room. Though it does help that the monitor will highlight the room you're in so you can get your bearings. I also gotta point out this odd little quirk with the controls. To use a lever, you need to approach the lever, hold the interact button, and move the left stick down to pull the lever, or spin the left stick to use a crank. It's kinda like how levers work in Fall of Cybertron, but a little different. I've heard the game will have VR support, so I guess this just makes it easier to facilitate that particular feature. There's more that I'll talk about, but I'll cover them in due time. So let's talk about the story for now. You play as Arnold, a Fazbear technician who gets a call to retrieve a prototype endoskeleton from Murray's Costume Manor, the factory/storage facility of their contractor Edwin Murray. You're given a device called a data diver to access terminals around the facility. This device can be upgraded with higher security permissions to further access different parts of the building to find collectibles and progress the story. You're taken through a brief tutorial to get to the client and delivery entrance and enter the security office. And dispatch tells you that you need to get the power back on, but we need to upgrade our security clearance from basic to security. This involves a mini-game where you need to turn all the zeros into ones. The arrow will move on its own. When it touches one of the tiles, it'll turn the 0 into a 1, and vice versa. But you can make the arrow switch which row it's moving through by selecting the row and hitting the button to swap the row. These end up getting pretty tricky to where you need to swap the row just as the arrow is moving through the tile, because there are tiles with X's on them and you need to avoid touching those, otherwise you fail the minigame. But thankfully, the arrow moves slow enough to where this task isn't too difficult. I definitely enjoy this minigame. Now that we have a security level permission, we can go to the tube puzzle and reset the power. Oh yeah, the tube puzzles also require you to hold the interact button and rotate the left stick to rotate the tile. Dispatch then tells you that you need to get to the warehouse management office, as you can't access Murray's office with security level permissions. So you get the repair level permissions and take the crank from the box over here. Hold up. I think I know who's gonna be in there. Called it! So you go to the warehouse management office where you find the management bot and a generator that you need to start up. After you do that, Jackie shows up having broken out of her box and she wants to play tag, where she tags the manager robot and throws him against the back wall, allowing you to escape from the hole left behind. You get to an elevator, and once you reach the top, you need to run from Jackie. You need to flip switches to unblock your path and slow her down. You end up falling through a vent back to the security office, and dispatch gives you some information about the endoskeleton you're retrieving, namely about avoiding or distracting it to not die. And they also tell you that another upgrade station is in the showrooms. After you reset the welcome show, you gotta do maintenance on the elevator by getting the audio cassette from the balcony and take it to the repairmatic, and you'll be walked through the process of fixing the elevator, but do it wrong and you die and have to start over. You get to the big top showroom and you need to spin the prize wheel until you win the grand prize. But you only get one free spin, so you need to beat the minimum score on the minigame to get another chance at the prize wheel. But each time you win one of the minigames, the power goes out and you need to sneak past Big Top. You need to avoid his lights while staying away from the mannequins which make noise to be able to get to the tube puzzle to reset the power. And there are lockers you can hide in to stay out of sight if he's almost on you. But Big Top won't stop looking for you when you get back to the entrance, so you have another incentive to quickly solve the puzzle. You need to do this 3 times to be able to win at the prize wheel and be able to get creator permissions. You get to the roof and now you have to run from Big Top. Part of this involves staying away from the mannequins until you just need to burn rubber to the exit. Big Top ends up catching up to you, but his weight makes the catwalk and his handholds give out, making both of you fall. There's another upgrade station at the theater, but your only way to it is through the workshop where you need to build a spring-lock suit in order to use the elevators. So you grab each piece while sneaking past the mimic. I like these types of fetch quests where you need to assemble parts of a larger whole, especially since you're building a spring-lock suit here. Now that you have the spring-lock suit, you can now use these specific elevators to get to the puppet theater. The suit is equipped with an arm cannon, and just before you start thinking you can take down the mimic like you're a furry Megatron, it doesn't do anything to the mimic. It's just there to shoot targets. You're taken to the puppet theater, and what plays out is a little puppet show where Foxy plans out a party for the captain, the character that the spring-lock suit represents. But the captain finds out, and he isn't happy because the pirate rules state that parties, party snacks, and decorations aren't allowed because they'll attract a roctopus. This part consists of a shooting gallery where you need to shoot the targets to keep the meter on the balcony parallel to you out of the boo level, while fending off puppets if they're close to you. I watched Sesame Street as a kid, though to be fair, who the f didn't? And I could totally see this being a legitimate sketch on that show with the overall tone here. Though if you'd want something more like the Muppet Show, you'd definitely need a little more comedy here. Although there is a joke here that I could totally see being a part of the Muppet Show.
Bonjour, Monsieur Foxy. The snacks are ready. Lord, how much did you make? I say alone there was no guest list, so I made a little extra. It's not enough. I can make more.
To me, this joke carries similar energy to Kermit ordering a giant carrot instead of a giant parrot. As you progress through this section, the theater gradually collapses until you get to the end of the show. You wake up in the doll hospital, with Dolly checking up on you and giving an overview of the procedure to remove you from the suit, and telling you to wait until your number is called. Dolly is on a track and will move in a certain pattern. You can take advantage of this pattern to grab a gear and put it in the door to be able to open the door to the hospital. And once you're in the hospital, you need to put garbage in the recycling chutes while sneaking past Dolly. It's also here where you get admin permission. Once you put all the trash into the recycling chutes, you need to press this button and then go into the maintenance room to throw switches to open the chutes to stun Dolly with garbage and get her into the incinerator. But she won't give up without a fight, so you need to burn rubber until you get to a part where you need to start sneaking again in order to get to an elevator. The elevator ends up failing, so the PA system plays audio on how to fix it, but Dolly ends up jumping onto the elevator and it stops because you're over the weight capacity. So you need to flip the speed switch to get the elevator moving again, and before the elevator gets to the top, you see an endoskeleton leave Dolly. And sure enough, Dolly was possessed by the mimic, and so was Jackie. Now you just have a 6th and final permission, executive. So you gotta head down to the admin wing and sneak past Chica. But you also can't get too close to the cupcakes because they'll make noise and alert Chica. But thankfully, this office has plenty of lockers to hide in. Finally, I have all 6 permissions. Let's get those blueprints. A good chunk of this will just be spoilers from here on out, so skip here if you want to avoid it. You'll basically be at the outro, but whatever. And Murray's office is quite nice and cozy looking. After you get the blueprints from a secret room, the mimic shows up and you need to close the door and crawl through the vent. And you end up getting to an elevator where the only floor it goes to is the basement. Oh yeah, it's that time. It's time for the scariest section in this entire game. The Tiger Rock section. You need to make your way through this dark room while Tiger Rock stalks you. You need to quickly make it to these small patches of light and make sure you don't take your eyes off Tiger Rock for too long. You need to get to the yellow light at the end of the room and grab the Star Orphan and walk through the tunnel while avoiding Tiger Rock and place this Star Orphan in the socket. Thankfully, if you get attacked by Tiger Rock, you're taken back to the last Star Orphan you placed. And you end up taking the last one to the door out of here. But before we move on, I want to point out that beating this section gives you a trophy called Fundophobia. Castle, what's Fundophobia? Fundophobia is defined as the fear of farms, which may stem from several stimuli associated with the trade. Okay, good to know. Wait, what does this have to do with the Tiger Rock section, though? If I were to hazard a guess, it might have something to do with the sockets you place the Star Orphan toys into, which are shaped like flowers, and flowers are commonly grown on farmland for ornamental or commercial use. Okay, now it makes sense. So we go back to the office and dispatch tells you to hand over the data diver, and you can do one of 2 things. If you hand over the data diver, you're told to go back to the van and drive home. But it turns out that you were tricked by the mimic because dispatch gets mad at you for misplacing company property and tells you that their lawyers will call you. And it turns out the mimic is also in your van and attacks you. And now you're stuck in a springlock suit with prototypes of Bonnie and Chica. Well, I guess there's only one thing to do. You created a liar, a hollow face in the image of someone who could never be replaced. I was buried by fire and left to waste till the day when a savior would free me from my grave. More on the mimic tricking you. After the Jackie chase, you receive a message from dispatch, but it starts off with distorted interference.
Awesome.
And considering you hear this when you get a call from dispatch in this ending, that means dispatch was actually not talking to you this whole night, and it was the mimic all along. This actually makes a bit of sense because the mimic was able to impersonate Gregory from the Security Breach Ruin DLC, and Gregory was also trying to reach Cassie all night and couldn't. But you'll notice there's an option on the computer called parachute.exe. Selecting this option will open up a secret passageway where you're taken back to the welcome show, and you can start the goodbye show and press the button on the podium. You start descending and Big Top starts chasing you and you gotta flip levers to keep going, and you'll need to flip multiple levers later on. You end up coming across a recreation of the FNAF 1 restaurant with prototypes of Foxy, Chica, Bonnie, and Freddy, and the mimic will also be down here dressed as a hodgepodge of the different characters. You need to use the different springlock suits down here to drain the door power by putting them under the red lights. Once the door power is drained, you come across a big computer that tells you to go to Edwin's house and activate the communication sub-terminal to convince him to repair M2. So you take a ride to Edwin's house, which is in a state of dishevelment, and I quite like the wallpaper and decoration. And seeing all this dust and just stuff all over the place, it feels like this house hasn't had any upkeep in a while. As for what you do here, you need to find different film reels which show different recordings of Edwin, his wife, and his son David. They show how Edwin loved his family but was too sidetracked with his work. And when Fiona died, he couldn't accept the loss, so he had the mimic impersonate her. We'll get back to this in a bit, but you need to watch these tapes to see the number at the end of them. And there's a keypad upstairs, and the different reels are also color-coded, with a picture nearby of David's name written in different colors, so you need to enter the numbers from the tapes in the same order. One part that stumped me, believe it or not, was the exclamation point in the picture. I thought there might have been a 6th tape I was missing for the longest time because I thought it may have been a clue when it wasn't. But when you enter the code and open the door, you come to Edwin's office that has a massive hole blown into it. Throughout the game, there have been audio logs that have given different bits of lore. One of them has Edwin losing his temper and taking it out on the mimic because Edwin ended up losing his son when he lost a ball in the road and got hit by a car, and the mimic imitated David's voice, which didn't help matters. The recording in Edwin's office has the Mimic imitating Edwin, with Edwin on the floor begging for the Mimic to call for help, but the Mimic mocks him, telling him to let him work like how he did with David. Edwin created a monster, and his negligence for his family added fuel to the fire. You open the surveillance room and activate cradle.exe, which allows you to escape through the experimental storage full of weird prototype robots, with the whole building coming down on you. I suppose this could be the purpose of cradle.exe. You get out of the factory and back to the van, but the Mimic followed you, and it makes you crash. The Mimic takes the data diver from Arnold, leaving him to burn alive. There's one final ending, and it requires you to beat a minigame I haven't spoken of yet. This game has collectibles like Steelwool's other FNAF games, and you're supposed to put them in the inventory machine to log them, and I needed to get to a spot where I knew the autosave would trigger to make sure that I kept it. Once you do, they'll be available as items in a minigame called moon.exe. You don't need every single collectible to beat it, but I grabbed everything just to be sure, which wasn't too hard to do because beating the game unlocks the New Game Plus mode, which keeps all the collectibles you already found, so you don't have to worry about them. Finding David's ball required me to go down to a place that is totally out of the way of everything else, and it's another basement with this moon guy that will kill you if you run into him. You need to avoid him while finding pieces of a tube puzzle in the center in order to get the ball. You can find a star orphan to help you light the way through these tunnels, and you get a checkpoint for every piece that you find. This was still tough though. Anyway, Moon.exe is one of those escape room type puzzle games where you look around your environment to find items to use for the puzzles. I appreciate that the game gives you enough of an idea on what you should do in order to progress, while still letting you figure out what to do. I would certainly like to play other games like this.
Excuse me, who are you? I'm Battle Japan. I left my knife somewhere. Do you know where it might be? Is that it? Oh yeah, that's my knife. Thanks.
The end of the game has you coming across an upgrade machine, and when you complete the minigame, the old woman you met in the game thanks you for completing her tasks and grants you the 7th permission called Glitched. Now you have to take it back to the house via the parachute.exe program, and now you have access to those rooms that have the changing lights to find audio tapes to put in the tape players. I think it's neat that these two different endings have you looking for different media formats. You can now go through the vent with the tiger plush, and you need to push buttons in the correct order to play audio of a bedtime story to get the Mimic to imitate David and go to sleep. The Mimic is very tired. It is eepy. The Mimic has had a very long night of looking for workers and now wants to take just a small sleep. He eeby and neeby to sleepy. The Mimic sleepy and need bed by time. The Mimic is currently experiencing critical levels of being a sleepy little bot and needs to go to bed. He's very tired and needs to sleep. Just a little sleeping time is a treat. The Mimic needs to slack. Very tired Botto. Just a little guy. Okay, no, I'm done. Castle is getting furious at me with all these spelling errors in this script. I do think it's kinda lame that this ending just cuts off here, and I wish that Arnold was more of a character here. I mean, Ethan Winters was more interesting than Arnold here. I mean, he at least was a man on a mission trying to get his daughter back. But that was Secret of the Mimic, and overall, this game is pretty good. Secret of the Mimic is security breach done right. The atmosphere is much better, it's plenty scary, it's far more fun, and its story feels more complete. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and I'll catch you next time. Thanks for watching and gotta zoom.